Okay, hi. This lesson is going to help you revise the gender section of the diversity exam. Three things we're going to look at. We're going to revise some key theories. We're going to look at some data. We'll also talk through how you approach the diversity question, and we'll go through some tips on essay writing and targets. Okay, you'll need to have the PowerPoint open separately because there's some activities on there, and I'll direct you back and forwards to those. The next, I think, 10 slides are some revision activities for you. They're little like find 5 questions. So I'd like you to pause the PowerPoint here, go back and do those questions. Also, on those questions, there's some directions for things that you might like to read. So I put some links to a couple of articles from Deborah Cameron, and they're really, really fantastic. Some really good takedowns of the diversity and the difference theorists, and some great examples in there as well. So if you want some further reading or you can't quite remember the ins and outs of diversity theory, those would be a good place to go. Okay, I'll join you again at slide 11. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed your revision start and hope it's also given you some idea of where you might need to focus some of your revision. We're going to do a quick recap on Tannen's ideas about gendered language styles because the question that we're going to look at today is based on the difference theory. So if you're unclear at all, if you want to stop now and read the article in the corner, it's a link to from her book You Just Don't Understand. You might want to summarise her ideas and quiz them and so on. But in a nutshell, difference theory, Tannen's ideas about difference theory. So the idea that men and women see the world differently. No language style is better or worse. They're just different. And they reflect the fact that men see the world as a place where people try to achieve and maintain status, whereas for women, the world is a network of connections seeking support and consensus. She sums up these differences in a pair of 6 oppositions. So men seek status, whereas women seek support. Men seek intimacy. Men seek independence, where women seek intimacy. Men give advice, where women are looking for understanding. Men deal in information, women in feelings. Men are happy with conflict, whereas women seek compromise. Men give orders, whereas women make proposals. You'll notice, obviously, that those rely on some fairly stereotypical ideas about gender, and that's probably one of the key criticisms of the difference theory. Basically, she thinks there's a whole cultural difference between men and women because they are socialized in different ways, and this is reflected in their speech. And from these different, so men and women speak different languages, they belong to different cultures, they speak different varieties of language. And because of this, there are obviously, there are miscommunications. Okay, so you've done a bit of revision. What we're going to look at next is what you need to do with your knowledge. Okay, so the diversity essay is a debate essay, it's an evaluative debate. So I think it helps to think about it in terms of how a debate works. So if you look at that picture in the bottom of your screen, that's you at the front, okay? You're like the host or the anchor, if you like. You will outline the issue, you will outline the debate, you will then give airtime to each of the theorists in turn, and you'll challenge them where relevant, and in the end, you will put together a final summing up. Okay, and that's your essay. So obviously, in between, the theorists will disagree with each other. They will have their turn to put their case, to state their evidence, and then you as the anchor, you'll challenge that, and then you will throw the floor to another theorist who will put a different point of view that probably challenges the one that came before. And that picture pretty much sums up how your essay will work. Okay, so here are our key areas of debate surrounding gender, like the way our male and female language. So to start with, do men and women use language differently? How consistent and significant are the differences between male and female language use? Are they, for instance, more significant or less significant than differences between the way people of different classes use language, the way people of different ages or regional identities use language? So how significant is gender as a difference? Could the perceived differences between male and female language be attributed to other factors? Could it be that we see the differences that we're looking for instance? What are these key differences between male and female language, and what might the reasons behind these differences be? Okay, it is a pretty heated debate. Theorists disagree vehemently on how, why, and even whether men and women use language differently. So I think it's helpful to think of this as an ongoing debate. Okay, so initially we start with deficit theory. So way back in 1922, Otto Jespersen, he writes a book about language, and he has one chapter, this whole huge treatise about language, and there's one chapter on women's language. And pretty much his chapter talks about the ways in which women's language isn't quite as good as men's language. There's a deficit, there's something missing in female language. So it takes male language as the norm and says, well, there's something missing, something not quite as good, in female language. Lakoff develops these ideas. 1975 is her book, Language in Women's Place, and she talks about female language as lacking the authority of male language, and she identifies some key features of female language, which she says highlight this lack of authority. Then after that, there comes a dominant theory, which talks about the idea that there are differences between male and female language, but that these differences are created by and also perpetuate, so allowed to continue, the male domination and female subordination in society. So men and women use language differently because men have power, expect to have power. Women expect not to have power. They expect to be deferential. So the language that they use reflects that and also allows it to continue. Different theory disagrees with that and says, well, no, it agrees that yes, there are substantial and significant differences in male and female language, but it says, well, male language and female, neither one is better or worse. They are just different. As Tannen says, men and women see the world in different ways, and their language reflects these different perspectives on life. And then you have the kind of denial or diversity theory, which looks at everything that's gone before and says, actually, really, the differences between male and female language have been hugely overstated. Male and female language is far more similar than it is different. And lots of the reasons that we see these differences are because that's what we expect to see. We have all sorts of stereotypes and prejudices about male and female language. We expect to see differences, and so we find them. This whole idea of men seek power, men are more dominant, men are independent, whereas women seek consensus, women are more collaborative. Well, these are just myths that have grown up and been supported. And gender is just one dimension of difference among many, and it's not the most significant one. Also, some of the differences that we see in male and that we have attributed to gender are actually to do with other things like power in a particular situation. Finally, probably the most recent thinking about language has moved to a social constructivist or performativity theory. The idea that language isn't who we are, it's what we do, and we will use language to construct our identity differently in different social contexts. Okay, to be really clear, each theory doesn't cancel out or disprove the ones that have gone before. We don't kind of move from one to the other. So the story of the development of our thinking doesn't just go. One doesn't cancel out the ones that went before. They just develop and widen the debate, offering an ever wider range of conflicting ideas. There is no clear agreement on one right answer, except for a deficit theory, which is probably now outdated and pretty much discredited. Okay, so this means when you're writing, it makes sense to preface your statements with dominant theorists maintain that, or as a different theorist, Tannen might interpret this as showing. So sit in the fence to some extent. Okay, so we'll think about how all of this might fit into your answer. So we're going to look at this question here. Evaluate the idea that spoken interactions between men and women are characterized by miscommunication. Okay, So I think the best way to prepare for this paper is to practice every stage of the process. Okay, so we're going to look at next at how we write a plan, and we'll have a go at writing an evaluative paragraph. You marked, as you remember, AO1 for writing like a linguist, so develop and signpost a clear argument and apply a range of different framework levels. So look at, so if you can talk about phonology, perhaps in terms of uptalk in women's language. They put a question at the end of statements, for instance, that would be an example. So look at lexis, grammar, pragmatics, and discourse. AO220, the dominant assessment objective here is to evaluate and challenge theories and support these with data and examples. Okay, just a quick revision resource for you here. Here are the big 6 theorists in language and gender. So pause that if you need to read, and pause now if you need to read those over again. Okay, there's the mark scheme. Have a look at where your target is. Okay. I think having an exam protocol is really important because exams are nerve-wracking. I think it's good to have an idea in your head of, right, this is what I'm going to do. I will look at the question, I will look at my blank sheet paper, and this is what I'll do. So firstly, you're going to deconstruct the question, you're going to write a plan, you're going to, and then you're going to start your introduction, where, as I said, where you are, Michelle Hussein, outlining the issue and the debate. You will then guide the reader through your evaluation, and in your conclusion, you'll sum up and draw some evaluative conclusions. Okay. So interrogate the question, be really clear about what the issue is and the arguments that you're going to make. It's not going to be a straight yes or no. There are a number of different viewpoints which you need to evaluate. Be selective about your points and choose the ones that link most clearly to the question. So don't make it hard for yourself by choosing concepts or ideas that you will need to twist around to fit the question. You by now have a huge body of knowledge in relation to any of the diversity questions. Just pick the best points in relation to the question that you've got. Okay, so interrogate our question. You need to start by defining your terms. Miscommunication is key, so you need to define it. You need to show the examiner that firstly, you know what it means and that you understand its significance in the gendered language debate. So you, as a language student, you know, okay, miscommunication, you know that's pretty much asking you to evaluate the difference theory. Okay, interactions between men and women remind us we are focusing on mixed sex conversations. We're not looking at representations of gender in written text. We aren't looking particularly at single sex conversations. We're looking at mixed sex interactions. And right there, first word, evaluate. That means weigh up the strengths and limitations of this argument and come to your own conclusion. So what makes this argument convincing? What are the key strengths? What are its flaws? Okay. There's some points here that you might consider in making your plan. Have a read through, pause and read through some of those. Okay. Now, once you've done that, I would like you to pause and write down what you think. Knowing where you stand is going to help you direct your argument. So ultimately, there's all these theorists, they try to convince you. What do you think? So take 5 minutes to do that now. Okay, so your basic essay structure, outline the terms, a series of evaluative paragraphs, ultimately on the basis of the evidence, this is what I think. Okay. And this is how each paragraph should break down. So start with a discourse marker to show where your argument's going. For instance, however, this interpretation is challenged by, and then move into your hourglass paragraph. So start wide with a topic sentence outlining the main ideas, so the issue or the argument of the theorist. Then in the middle, go narrow, focus in on a specific research example. Okay, and this is where you'll want your detailed framework analysis of data and the key insights. At the end, remember to go wide again, finish every paragraph by wrapping up your point, linking it back to the debate and evaluate how convincing it is. Remember your data example, so you might want to pause now and add some data examples to your plan. Okay, there's an example of a conclusion, how you're going to refocus on the initial conclusion and sum up. Some phrases and words that might be helpful, and these were our targets from last time. So As you're writing, keep referring back to the slides here. Okay, thank you.